On today's podcast, we talk Super Bowl commercials. Plus, is black the new nostalgia? All this plus Doctor Who on today's episode of the Geek Watch podcast.
This is the Geek Watch podcast with Brian Hatcher and Mandy Petrie.
Greetings, Geek Watchers, and welcome to episode 99 of the Geek Watch podcast. I'm Brian Hatcher, and with me, as always, Geek Watch's own resident geek goddess, Mandy Petrie.
Hello, Brian.
So the Super Bowl was last weekend.
Was it?
Yeah.
I guess it was.
Well, yeah, somebody won for sure, but there was some commercials, and we talked about this last time. I mentioned, of course, they were going to have a Rick and Morty Pringles commercial, which was as weird and morbid as you would expect, and some of the other ones we'd seen. The couple that I was that surprised me that I was interested in was there was a commercial for Quicken Loans with Jason Momoa. And I know you didn't get to see any of these commercials, but yeah, the one with Jason Mamoa was great because of course, he's heading home, and he's talking about how home is the place where he can be himself. And he walks in his front door, closes the door, and then he kicks his boots off, and you realize, oh, there's some major lifts in the boots. He's obviously shorter, right? And then, of course, he pulls off the fake muscles off of his arms, his chest piece. So he's this dangly, skinny person. And he sits down, he goes, but at home I can be myself. And then he pulls his wig off, and it's basically a comb over. So a lot of people had issues with this commercial. They said it was way too uncanny valley. It was just kind of creepy watching him pull his arms off.
Yeah.
Of course, the great thing at the end was his wife was standing behind him while he's trying to press a barbell. No weights on it, just the bar. And he's having a real struggle. And she's like, you can do it. He's like, take it. And she just reaches up. One-handed, puts it back. Oh, that was good, honey. Which was funny. It's awesome that, of course, that he has that sense of humor, that he can
make fun of himself.
Absolutely, which was great. The other one that I didn't know about this, but of course we did get a teaser trailer for the three Marvel shows that are coming out on Disney Plus, and of course the one of them, the one that I was definitely interested in seeing was seeing scenes from WANDAVISION, which after seeing it, of course, at this point we've been hearing rumors about the show for a while. But certainly after seeing the trailer, we can definitely tell that the show is going to be well. If you don't mind me using the industry term for it, batshit crazy.
I would have gone avant-garde. Yeah.
Well, it's going to definitely be. I mean, they said that it was going to be sitcom-y. That it was going to
all the sitcoms apparently.
Yeah, because
everyone ever made.
Yeah, it's like you see the Dick Van Dyke Show. You saw
the Brady
Bunch. There was the one with Bewitched. It was where she was wearing the costume from the comic.
Oh, that's funny.
You had Bewitched. You had Family Ties in there. Roseanne was in there. I mean, it was just like all kinds of crazy stuff. So, exactly what's going to happen in that show, who can tell? Of course, we got a little bit of a taste of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And there's going to be, that's going to be the first of the three that come out. And then, of course, we get Loki at the end, and we only get really kind of a teaser with Loki.
Yeah, he just looks like he's in a prison uniform.
Yeah.
And I would think it looks like an Earth prison uniform. I couldn't quite see the letters on the shirt, but so I don't know where he is.
I believe the letters were TVA, and that references, I believe, there's an organization in the Marvel universe, at least in the comics, of a group of people that they maintain the timelines, and so he might wind up going afoul of them because obviously he's going to be he's a trickster, and he has the Tesseract. So eventually they're gonna be like, you can't keep fouling up timelines like this for sure. So we definitely have that going. But it's going to be soon. I mean, we've got Black Widow is going to be coming out here soon, and we got a little bit more. We did see a Black Widow, a little bit of a different trailer on the Super Bowl, but it was it gave us a little more of the Taskmaster, but not a lot. And of course, we're going to be seeing that really, really, really soon. So definitely looking forward to that. What I did want to talk to you about today, because this was something we touched on last week. This really went home today. And like I said, this is something I've been looking forward to talking to you about, is I was reading The Hollywood Reporter, and there was an interview with Paul Rubens, Pee-wee Herman.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he is currently shopping around a new Pee-wee Herman movie.
Okay.
And he wants to do a dark take on Pee-wee Herman.
Well, he needs to bring back Tim Burton then, the original director. I mean, Tim Burton does dark well, you know.
I know he was talking to a couple of different directors, but basically, apparently, from what I'm hearing is the script involves Pee-wee Herman being locked in an insane asylum and getting shock treatments for alcoholism.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's
that's
dark.
Yeah, that's
exactly. One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Yeah, he's got shock treatments and all this type of stuff, and it's like, but it made me think, because again, we were talking last week about the dark turns and all this stuff. It seems like in Hollywood now, it's just there's this idea that we want to do darker movies, based off of stuff that we liked when we were younger.
Oh yeah.
We got Fantasy Island coming out, which is supposed to be a horror movie. They just did the Banana Splits film, which they made it. They basically did their version of Five Nights at Freddy's with the Banana Splits.
A Christmas Carol.
Yeah.
Yeah, just over, FX just did it over Christmas, and it was not the happy, or the grumpy old miser who just didn't want to share his fortune. I mean, Scrooge was an absolute asshole, and you wanted him to die and go to hell. So absolutely, we're getting this.
Yeah, it seems like we're getting to a point now where we're really wanting to get all these dark takes on movies, and especially nostalgia wise, and going back, because we were talking about WandaVision, it seems like, they're going through all these 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s sitcoms, that they're going to go through all these, light family sitcoms, but there's going to be like a dark thread underneath all of it. Because obviously, the Vision is dead, and of course now he's alive, and so there's all this talk about where all this stuff is coming from. And so, I mean, that's definitely got that kind of a dark thread to it. But it just seems like right now and it's been going on for a little while.
I think about Pleasantville, the movie where Reese Witherspoon and Tobey Maguire get sucked into this sitcom, of the perfect world. And, when you look a little bit under the perfect world, everything seems perfect, but no one's happy. And you're basically stuck in hell, and you're stuck in this loop. So that would definitely be, going with those, the 1950s and 60s sitcoms, that they just, just under the surface. If we dig just a little deeper, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, it seems like we are, as a culture, we are fascinated now with deconstructing a lot of this stuff. And I wonder, I mean, part of it, I think, is I guess, in a real sense, this is by taking a look at it through that lens, where it's a way of looking at the subject in a more mature manner with more of a critical eye. It gives the subject maybe a little bit more gravitas because, of course, we're taking light, friendly entertainment that's, in a real sense, you could say is disposable, and actually putting some gravitas into it. And I mean, that may be part of it, but also, and we talked about this last week, I mean, we seem to be, as a culture right now, really fascinated with dystopian futures. Yep. And I think that there's sort of like a zeitgeist about, the worst possible thing that could happen. That's pretty much what we're focusing on at this point. So I have to wonder, because it seems like, and especially in nostalgia now, like I said, we're continuing to kind of go back into nostalgia, but we want to give it, a dark turn. And it seems like we're
I haven't watched it, but Lost in Space. the new series, and I guess even the 1990s movie was, it was in the old series was, traveling through space with robots and stuff like that. And then when we get to these, newer adaptations of the same story, giving it a much more, there's saboteurs, there's, they have to go look for a new place to live because we've killed Earth. So yeah, it's been going on quite a while. So
yeah, like I said, I wonder if part of it might have to do with the fact that we're older. A lot of the stuff that we look, that was, when we were kids, we were really into. By revisiting it to make it more up to date, we figure, well, we've got to sort of tarnish it a little bit.
It had to grow with us.
Yeah. And where we are right now is, I think, again, as a culture, I think maybe we are more pessimistic. And I think, that's being, art tends to reflect the culture of the time. And I think our art at this point is taking some of the nostalgia in the past and, stripping the nice paint off of it, and giving it a patina in a real sense. And I think also it's the fact that we seem to be, right now, really fascinated with, the darker side of things. And for people who who read horror and like horror fiction, this is a good thing for sure. But I wonder if a straight out remake of a comedy, of a sitcom comedy, how successful that would be. AMC's coming out with a 50s style sitcom, but it's more reflective on the mother. And it's supposed to be the seedy underbelly of the 50s family sitcom, very much like Pleasantville, like you were talking about. And so it's another example of how we're kind of going back into the past and sanding off some of the.
Well, a couple of the networks, I haven't watched them, but a couple of networks did like live versions of All in the Family and Good Times, just. Like one was starring Woody Harrelson.
Yeah, he played Archie Bunker.
Archie Bunker. So, I've heard good things about them, that, they were funny and everything. So doing a straight remake it doesn't seem like it's had a negative appeal to people, but.
Yeah, well, the thing about it, of course, I remember All in the Family and the Jeffersons when they first aired. And of course, the thing about those shows, and of course, this was the genius of Norman Lear, is, it already had the hard edge to it because, of course, Archie Bucket was a bigot and a racist. The show was basically to make fun of him and those attitudes that he had. It was a very political show. And so they fit just as well in our modern times as they did back then. In a real sense, I think, those type of shows come tailor-made, for the 21st century. Although, in a lot of sense, I would have thought, or at least I would have hoped that we would have gotten farther along than we have at this point. But, it is what it is. So, like I said, it's just, it seems weird to me right now that we're in a really pessimistic, dark place. And it's like, so much of our art now at this point seems to reflect a lot of it. And, like I said, I don't know if light, breezy entertainment necessarily has a place in our market now, although I have to say there's nothing dark and mysterious and depressing about, like, say, the on the Disney Plus, the World According to Jeff Goldblum. That's just, that's just delightful.
That's just fluff, yeah.
So, but it's fluff in one sense, but in another sense, it's very well thought out and very educational as well. I guess under the circumstances we could say, it's not, it wouldn't be impossible, but, it's like, all our art these days, they have edges, and, I figure that's going to be that's not going to change anytime soon. So, but speaking of entertainment, of course, we know what time it is.
Aha! Is that time?
Yes. And so we did get a new episode of Doctor Who called Praxis. Mm-hmm. And we're back on Earth again. I've noted The Doctor hasn't really left the solar system too awfully much in this season.
Nope.
So we get the episode called Praxis, and a little bit of a mystery going on, and we get the first time when they split up the team.
Mm-hmm. Never split the party.
Well, there's there's definitely that, but that way, that's one of the strengths of having that many companions is you're able to kind of split the story up like that, and so. To that aspect, I thought that was some really good storytelling. Needless to say, folks, there's going to be spoilers. So from this point on, so if you've not seen this episode of Doctor Who, pause the podcast now. And then we'll come back after you've seen it because, this is again, although there wasn't the big massive surprises like we got in the episode before. Yeah, this is definitely not something you want to have spoiled for sure. So what did you think?
I wasn't that big a fan of this episode. It really felt like everything that happened in the last episode was just not important in this episode, and kind of like last season, it could have been in any part of the season of the season. It could have been the first episode, could have been the fifth. It really didn't matter. And, I'm such a big Doctor Who fan, and I will defend it, to the ground. But this one, it really didn't do it for me. Our guest stars, I wasn't sad or anything. I really didn't feel like he was trying to really find his husband, and he was all that hurt that he was missing or anything. And, whereas some other episodes you can really feel that with your guest stars and their plight and what they're going through. And I don't know if it was lack of chemistry or the fact that we really didn't get to see them together, maybe 3 minutes on screen together, but I just I wasn't that big a fan of this episode, and it may have been because of the news that you told me yesterday that I went and looked at afterwards.
Oh.
What did you think about the episode?
We'll talk about the episode
without the bias of that.
And since you brought that up, we will talk about that little piece of news here after we get done with the episode. But one thing I can definitely say to the positive for that episode is there is, of course, a TV trope of, the gay guy has to die. It's like, we'll bring in the gay guy so he die. He's going to wind up dying. And there was that scene where you're like, oh, here it goes, because you can't let the gay guy live, or at least one of them. And but the Doctor
last minute, we save him last minute, which
for some old school Doctor Who fans was kind of a bummer for him,
let
because
down,
well, specifically not because this person was saved, but it's like, well, then why didn't the fifth Doctor save Adric? If you guys remember that Earth Shock, that episode was a punch to the gut to a lot of old school Doctor Who fans, because of course you had this long standing character that wound up dying. And it was one of the very few episodes of Doctor Who, old Who or new Who, where they didn't play the music at the end, where it was just silent at the end, and they changed they basically changed the ending where you saw scrolling credits, but the picture was the broken star, which was Adric's badge.
Aww.
And so a lot of people are like, you could have saved Adric, but of course the thing about it is what people forget from that episode was the Cyberman shot the control panel, and so the TARDIS was damaged, and he couldn't save him. So that was that was in there. So, but besides that, we're getting another environmental story.
Yep. Yes.
You're getting another. You basically
save the whales. Yeah.
Yeah. It was basically a virus that attacks plastic
and multiplies it like a benign tumor inside of you, or a metastatic tumor inside of you. Yeah. Yeah,
very much so. And so that was so you get it. Of course, it's another Earth adventure, and you also get a situation where Ryan is interacting with a female, but nothing ever happens. So it's like, you get those, it seems like because Ryan travels so much, I guess it's
Ryan has no game.
Yeah, well, it's like, how much game does anybody have when they have, not that much time, and then they have to get back into the TARDIS. So, yeah, so another environmental story, although it's definitely not nearly as preachy as Orphan 55 was, where, of course, at the end of Orphan 55, you had, they're practically delivering the message to the audience. But, again, I can understand what you were saying about, the characterizations were not the strongest for sure. The acting was not the strongest.
And then saving him at the end did nullify his sacrifice, which is my Joss Whedon fandom, comes out of me, that redemption is a big deal. And I think if he had passed away at the end, then that would have made me feel more for him than him getting saved there at the last minute.
Well, I guess ultimately that comes down to what's more important. Is it is it breaking that trope of you got to kill the gay guy off, or this person having his having his arc? So that's a good question. I mean, as a writer, that's a tough call to make. I think a writer is going to, if they're aware of a trope, they're most likely going to want to break that trope. But at the same time, like you say, story is important for sure. So, but of course, then we'll have the episode next week is some sort of a boogeyman for sure, and it may be. I don't know if they're going to necessarily develop anything more with this new Doctor or the Timeless Child. One thing that they've said is, of course, we have 2 more episodes, and then we get a double. We'll get a 2-parter, and that'll be the end of the season. So we get 2 more episodes, including this one, and then a 2-parter, and that'll be it for this season. But of course, then where they're going to go with the ender, I'm not sure. What thread they're gonna deal with. But since you brought it up, we will, before we go, we will mention something.
You have Joe versus the BBC volcano.
Yeah. Well, Joe Hill, and we've talked about him on the show a bunch, and of course he's we have to mention him because of the fact that Lock and Key is coming out really soon
on Netflix. Watch it because it's going to be good.
Oh yeah, and he's really good at writing fantastical with a touch of horror.
Yes.
In fact, he should write for Doctor Who.
Wouldn't it be great? I mean, he wrote Nosferatu, he wrote Horns, he's got endless books, awesome short stories, and apparently he wanted to write for Who, right?
Yes, and so he appeared on Brian Keene's The Horror Show podcast, and I'm a good friend with Brian Keene. I've known him for years and years and years, and love listening to his podcast. And Joe Hill was on the podcast, and of course they've been friends for a while, so they were talking about all kinds of different things. And the question came up, what was the harshest rejection you ever received? And so Joe Hill brings up this story where he's a huge fan of Doctor Who, and he's like, I want to write for them. How do I do this? So he talked to his agent, and they were getting pitches together because, of course, anybody who's creative, like Joe Hill, for sure, he had some ideas, and he appears at conventions, as a lot of writers do. And he was at a convention that Neil Gaiman was at.
Neil Gaiman of American Gods and
2 episodes
and Good Omens, and how many episodes?
A couple of episodes of Doctor Who. Really good episodes of Doctor Who. And they got together, and Joe said, I want to pitch to the BBC. These are my ideas. And Neil was like, this one's really good. You should develop it this way. This one doesn't work so well. I don't like this one. You should put this one off to the side. And basically helped him edit the pictures. And so he got his pitches together with Neil Gaiman's help, his own creativity. He pitches it, and after he sends in his pitch, he gets an email that basically says, we have Americans.
Never had an American write for Doctor Who, and if we did, we wouldn't start with you.
That's a smoking.
and that's what Joe Hill said. Isn't that the most smoking rejection you've ever gotten? And when you told me about it, I thought about it for a while, and then I first of all, reading the transcript of that interview and everything, and he's talking about, he loved watching it with his kids, and David Tennant was like, "Oh, Joe Hill and I have the same doctor," and it was really cool. And I want to know, like, which regime was this under? Because we've heard Christopher Eccleston talk about under Davies there was mistreatment of staff and things like that, and not sure how things went under Moffat. Who was in charge when this came about? And if it was recently, to be as less vulgar as I could think, Joe Hill could have left a better episode in the toilet than the one we got on Sunday. And I don't say that lightly.
Yikes.
I do not say that lightly, but, Praxis was, I don't think it was nearly at the top of what Doctor Who should be. Everyone deserves better. The cast and crew deserve better. The fans deserve better than what we got on Sunday. And I am such a Who fan, and I will defend it down to the ground. Even all the stuff that other people don't like, I love, but we deserve better. And,
well, you got to call it as you see it, for sure.
And Joe Hill would make, he's a great writer.
Well, I would say if there's an American, if there was an American who could write Doctor Who, Joe Hill could definitely. And as a matter of fact, people are like, there is and I believe the name of the book is Nowhere O'Clock, which is a series of Doctor Who stories that was edited by Neil Gaiman, and both Brian Keane and Joe Hill have stories in it. So he has written Doctor Who before.
Yeah.
So it's not like he couldn't, and especially with his pedigree, for sure.
Yeah. Like if Daddy King had said, "Hey, I want to write for Doctor Who," would BBC have had the testicular fortitude to say no? Well,
I have a feeling they probably would, because, obviously, because the thing about it is this, and I get, there's a British sensibility, for sure. But at the same time, and I'm not even just saying, in the case of Joe Hill, I can think of a lot of great American writers, male, female, people of color that are American writers that would do amazing things with Doctor Who if they were given the chance, At least one thing I can say is somebody who likes to write, as I do, at least I'm not going to waste my time fantasizing how cool it would be to write for Doctor Who, because if Joe Hill can't get a job there, I don't got a prayer. So I can have my I can daydream about something else now. My time can be better spent, I would say. But that was a bit of a shock.
Felt like BBC really shot themselves in the foot.
Well, that's the thing, though. The BBC can be really wonky sometimes. And like I said, I'm not blaming this on any of the showrunners, whether it was Stephen Moffat or Chris Chibnall. I don't know if they even saw it. As of right now, of course, most of this stuff, most of the news, like I said, with Joe Hill and this smoking rejection, I don't see any of this being reported overseas. You're mostly seeing this in American. I'm going to be curious to see if this story goes viral and if the BBC eventually makes a comment about it. They probably won't. I don't know if Chris I'm just waiting for a convention somewhere for the question to be asked and to see, like Chris Chibnall, what he would have to say about that. Because very often, and over the history of the program, the BBC and Doctor Who have been at loggerheads where, what's best for the show is not necessarily what the BBC thinks is best for the show. And that, and that's been with old Who and new Who. So, like I said, I would be interested to see if this comes up in a convention and Chris Chibnall gets asked that question, what he'd have to say about it. But as of right now, it's all speculation. But if it happens, of course, we'll definitely talk about it here on the show. And so with that said, we come to the end of episode 99. Thank you for listening, and tune in next time for the latest in geek news and views with the Geek Watch podcast. For Mandy Petrie, this is Brian Hatcher, reminding all the Geek Watchers out there, we're all geeky about something. Be proud of yours. See you next time. Thank you for listening to the Geek Watch podcast. If you enjoyed this program, don't forget to like and subscribe on your preferred platform and share this podcast on your social media. For links to all the ways you can listen to the Geek Watch podcast, as well as leave comments and suggestions, visit our website at geekwatch.net. The Geek Watch podcast is a Hanging J production.